Hi, thank you for watching my Social 30 Family History project. All photos of people and farms portrayed in my project are true images found in family photo books. Throughout this video, you will learn about my place in Canadian history and why my families chose to immigrate to Canada. My great-great-grandfather, Richard Carl Matthews, was born in Westgau, Germany in 1873. Richard and his parents first chose to immigrate to Holloway, Minnesota in 1881. At this time, Germany was going through a depression that was causing the prices of products to go up while wages remained the same. They did not have the money to afford the rise in prices. At this time, the government created policies that stated they could not worship their religion in the way they desired. They also left to avoid compulsory military service at the time. They remained in the U.S. for 12 years. During this time, Richard married my great-great-grandmother, Mary Mons, who unfortunately I do not have a photo of. They had two children, Anna and my great-grandfather Otto. In 1903, they decided to immigrate to Canada as they were told about many farming opportunities here. They moved to the Macon district. They farmed south of Macon and had 4 more children. In 1918, they moved to a farm 2 miles south of Bryant with their 6 kids. Richard had always been good with construction. On their farm in Bryant, he built a big barn and remodeled the whole house, adding another story and a kitchen. The loft of the barn had hardwood flooring, which led to the famous Matthews family barn dances that began in 1914 and ran until 1940. My great-great-grandpa Richard was given a license for these parties that protected him against fires. Richard's wife, Mary, died in 1925 from cancer. Richard lived alone until 1947 when my great-grandpa Otto moved to the farm. They farmed together until Richard's death on December 21, 1961, at the age of 88 years, 7 months, and 19 days. Otto was born on February 25, 1900. He was the eldest of 6 kids. He immigrated to Canada at the age of 4 to the Macon district. They moved to a farm south of Bryant where he lived with his family until October 20, 1922, when he married Lydia Octavia. They had 8 children, including my grandpa, Raymond Richard Matthews, that was born on October 26, 1924. Otto did many other things along with farming to make a living for his family. His early farming years included 8 mules and later 1 horse and 1 tractor. Otto went through many summers with drought and grasshoppers. His crops failed and there were hailstorms that destroyed everything, the chickens, turkeys, and livestock. During the Great Depression, known as the Dirty 30s, they had to ship their cattle off to Winnipeg because they could no longer afford them. Instead of getting paid for them, he was told that he would need to pay $1.28 for shipping, but he refused to pay. Otto spent his last few years living on his farm with his sons until he became ill and spent a few months in the hospital before he passed away. My grandpa Raymond attended Golden Heart School. Raymond and his brother spent a lot of their childhood trapping gophers in order to trade their fur in for money. During his last year of school, Raymond lived with a friend Nick Tatley during seeding and harvest and helped out with farm chores. Grandpa said his pay at this time would have been about $1 a week. My grandpa Raymond was called to the Army in 1943. He took his basic training in Dundurn and his advanced training in Calgary. Raymond was sent to guard German prisoners in Medicine Hat, but was never sent to battle before his discharge in May 1946. Raymond met my grandma, Dora May Coles, and they married on September 19, 1952. They made their first home in Beanfate, Saskatchewan, while my grandma Dora worked as a nurse at the Beanfate Hospital. 1 year later, they moved to the mine site camp where Raymond was working. They lived here until 1963, and during this time they had 4 children. My Uncle Ken, Uncle Donald, Auntie Elizabeth, and Auntie Marilyn. In 1963, they built their own house in Estevan where they lived for the rest of their lives. They were blessed with 4 more children, including my Auntie Lorna, Uncle Daryl, Auntie Arlene, and my father Mark Ernest Matthews. My father Mark was born on April 6, 1968. And that's the story about how my dad, Mark Matthews, became a Canadian citizen. My mom's grandma, my great-grandma, Alma Bader, was born to a very poor family in Romania in 1914. At the time, Romania was a war-torn territory and there was a big famine going on. Because the family included 12 other kids, there was not enough food to feed them all. They had cousins that had immigrated to Saskatchewan, Canada years earlier. My great-grandma Alma, along with her brother Fred, were chosen by their parents to come to Canada to live a better life. They did not consider immigrating to any other country as they did not have any family living anywhere else except in Canada. Alma was only 10 years old and Fred was only 12 years old when they got on a ship all alone and traveled to Canada. They arrived at an eastern port in Canada in 1927. They then got on a train to travel to Saskatchewan. When Alma first arrived, she was sent to school. She had to learn English quickly, but the cousins already living in Canada could speak Romanian, which allowed them to communicate and translate to her in order to help her learn. Elma only made it to 4th grade before she had to be taken from school to help on the farm full-time. She was a farmhand for 6 years. These 6 years included the stock market crash in 1929 and the Great Depression. This was a period of severe dust storms which caused many agricultural damages to the farm. Elma later met my great-grandfather Johannes John Wallowine. John was born in North Dakota in 1909. John and his parents moved to the Bateman district the same year he was born. My great-grandpa John had feelings for Elma, but more so felt sorry for her working as a farmhand. He asked her to marry him, and they married sometime in the 1930s. Together they raised only 2 children, including my great-aunt Eileen and my grandpa Gilbert Wallowine. My grandpa was born on November 18, 1936, in Gravelbourg, Saskatchewan. My great-grandpa Max was born in Cole County, Missouri in 1896. He attended school until 4th grade. He then worked until he was enlisted into the U.S. Army towards the end of World War I in 1917. He never battled for the U.S. Army before his discharge 1 year later in 1918. 2 years later, he immigrated to Canada as he thought it would be a safer country to live in if another world war broke out. Max knew that Canadians were not forced to join the Army, and he also knew that many farming opportunities were available in Canada. At this time, the government was offering land for very cheap as they wanted settlers to come from all over to farm the land. Max met my great-grandma, Regina Warnicki, and they married in October 1922. They had 2 children on the farm near Weyburn and then decided they wanted to move back to Iowa, U.S. They had a few more children in Iowa before moving back to Canada for good and having the rest of their 9 kids. This shows how during this part of Canadian history, the immigration laws were not strict. You could cross the border to work and live without obtaining any sort of permit. The border did not become strict until 1990s. Max and Regina raised a family of 9 children, including my grandma, Helen Wallowine. My grandma, Helen Pohl, was born on September 3, 1937, on a farm north of Weyburn. After graduating from Weyburn Collegiate, she was accepted into university for nursing. She graduated in May 1959 and became a part of the Saskatchewan Psychiatric Nurses Association. My grandma always said her goal was to find a nice gentleman that was interested in rural living. My grandpa Gilbert Wallowine was interested in rural living and a gentleman, but lacked on the romance side of things when he asked for Helen's hand in marriage by saying, "If I bought you a ring, would you wear it?" Somehow this worked as she married him on April 27, 1963. Gilbert graduated from high school and then worked at various oilfield jobs until he entered into full-time farming in 1966. Together they were blessed with 6 children, including my Uncle Ken, Uncle Kevin, Auntie Deborah, Auntie Denise, Auntie Loretta, and my beautiful mother, Lynn Mary Wallowine. My mom, Lynn, was born on July 29, 1968. My parents, Lynn Mary Wallowine and Mark Ernest Matthews, met in 1988 and married on April 27, 1991. My mom attended the University of Regina and received her Bachelor of Education degree. She is currently a substitute teacher at the Holy Family School Division. My dad graduated from high school and spent a few years as a 1A truck driver for an oil company before obtaining a position at TS&M Supply. Years later, he was promoted to manager of the repair shop where he still works today, 25 years later. My parents gave birth to 3 children, my brother Calvin, my brother Logan, and myself, Michaella Helen Matthews, born on January 21, 1999. Immigration to Canada affected people in different ways during the 1900s. Chinese immigrants were forced to pay a $500 head tax in order to come to Canada. The War Measures Act of 1914 stated that any Germans and Ukrainians that immigrated to Canada after 1902 were considered criminal aliens. Many Germans were arrested and taken to internment camps and made to work backbreaking jobs for no pay. My German people were lucky as they were not arrested. We were prairie farmers and the officers focused more on the Germans that were working in big cities and factory jobs. The lives of all Canadians have changed over time as we all immigrated from somewhere. My great-great-grandpa Richard Carl Matthews immigrated from Germany, my great-grandma Alma Bader immigrated from Romania, and my great-grandpa Johannes immigrated from the USA. These 3 decisions to move to Canada allowed me, Michaella Matthews, to be born as a Canadian citizen. I wanted to bring the photos of my parents for life. This is my mom, Lynn Matthews. Hello. This is my father, Mark Matthews.
Hello.
Thank you for listening to my family history that gave all 3 of us our greatest gift, being Canadian.